having a lovely day. You're listening to TechFest Talks, a podcast by students for students. My name is Raaga. I'm currently in year 13 at Liverpool College, and I'm very excited to interview today's guest, an explorer and a researcher, Phillip Carrotte. Hello, Phillip. Can you please tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Raaga, great to meet you and great to be here. So I'm Phil Carrotte, and as a day job, I'm a consultant working for the engineering firm Costain. My normal day-to-day work is helping various clients, whether that's government, whether that's other industry partners, to deliver their projects and their programs in a better, more efficient way. But as well as that, I've got a hobby in mountaineering, which I developed whilst I was in the military. I did almost 20 years career in the army, and so that's how it's my mountaineering side that got me involved in the Antarctic expedition that I think we're going to talk about in a moment.
That sounds amazing. But before we could start talking about the Antarctic expedition, we'll go back to the roots. When and where did your initial interest in mountaineering start?
So that'll be when I was a child, and I'm an old man now, so it was a long time ago, back in the olden days. But I was really lucky to grow up in mid Wales, just outside a town called Brecon. And some of your listeners may know about the Brecon Beacons and the Black Mountains, and there's a range of hills in mid Wales. And I was in the Scouts, and with the Scouts, we did loads of hill walking and lots of rock climbing and loads of great activities like that. So really, when I was growing up in mid Wales, it was all through the Scouts and through friends. We used to go hill walking a lot. We'd go rock climbing, go to the indoor climbing wall. So that's how it all started, I suppose.
That sounds great. So, how did you manage to train yourself in mountaineering and get an MSc within construction economics and management, given that both of these tasks are very, very hard?
Um, I suppose that, well, I was lucky they were quite different times. So my mountaineering, let's start with that, I suppose. So I was lucky, as I say, I grew up in mid Wales and did lots of climbing and mountaineering.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went off to university initially to study mechanical engineering, and whilst I was there, I was really lucky to be in the mountaineering club and for a load of people to give me their time to teach me and to have patience with my silliness, shall we say, and make me a better mountaineer. So I was lucky enough to do lots of mountaineering through university, and I then joined the army. And in the army, we're really lucky that what the army call adventurous training includes things like mountaineering, rock climbing, skiing, canoeing, kayaking, sailing, and all of these adventurous pursuits are really encouraged to help develop teamwork and resilience and leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really fortunate to have some supportive bosses who allowed me to go away mountaineering, to go on expeditions, and to gain formal qualifications as well. So initially at a lower level, and then as I got a bit more experienced, I became an instructor in ski mountaineering and climbing in the Alps and things. So that's where all my mountaineering came about over almost 20 years of going away with work, going away with friends, and just making the most of every opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And then fast forward to only last year actually, an MSc. So I was leaving the military. I had some time on my hands, and I decided I'd try and get a master's. So I enrolled at UCL, at University College London, in an MSc in construction economics and management.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a totally different challenge because it was in the midst of COVID-19. I've got a young family now. An MSc is not an easy thing to get through at the best of times. I started a new job. So yeah, it was a challenging year getting that MSc under my belt. And I will admit that my mountaineering probably took a bit of a backseat during that year, just as other things took over.
But that's a commendable degree given that it's from UCL, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
In 2012, when working as the logistics officer, you ascended 7 unclimbed peaks. How did you make that possible? Like 7 unclimbed peaks, how?
Okay, so that was a former Antarctic expedition actually. So I mentioned adventurous training in the military, and I was really lucky that I was invited to join an expedition, or I was selected to join an expedition that was going to Antarctica in 2012, and I took the role of logistics officer for that trip. So there was 24 of us, and I helped to arrange all of the kit, all the equipment, all the food, sourcing it in the UK, and then getting it shipped to South America, into Chile, and then onwards to Antarctica, where the team of us, the team of 24, this was to celebrate Captain Scott's legacy. Actually, it was 100 years after his trip to the South Pole,
Mm-hmm.
and we conducted a range of scientific research, and we climbed loads of mountains, and I was just super fortunate that there was in my small team of 4, there was 3 other guys who were absolutely awesome mountaineers, and they dragged me up some mountains with them. Yeah, so we between us climbed, we think, 7 unclimbed peaks, and as a team of 24, we were one of the first teams to ski across the Antarctic Peninsula, which was a mammoth task, and we conducted a load of research, and we climbed, I don't know how many peaks in total, 20 or 30. It was a really, really strong expedition. And I was just really fortunate that it took 2 or 3 years of planning and preparation. Of course it did, but I was really fortunate to get involved in that.
Wow, that sounds fabulous. So, can you tell listeners more about your 6 months that you spent in South Sudan working alongside the UN, and how does it feel to work with the UN?
Okay, yeah, so South Sudan and the United Nations. So that was 2019, October, November time 2019. I went out for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Your listeners might know or might not that South Sudan is the youngest country in the world. So it was only formed, it only became a country in its own right about, I think it was 11, 12 years ago now.
Didn't know that.
That's right, yeah. So it's separated from Sudan. There's a very complicated history that we won't go into. But as a new country at the end of a civil war, there were clearly some problems, and so a UN mission was set up to help the country settle down and sort out its problems.
Mm-hmm.
So the UN mission is about 16,000 strong. There's military, there's police, and there's civilians helping to support the South Sudanese people. And the British Army had a quite a small but important role with about a 300 strong task force of mainly engineers, civil engineers, and construction engineers who were building roads and hospitals and accommodation in 2 towns in the north of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And my role was based in the capital city in a place called Juba, where I led a really small team of specialists, and between us we coordinated the logistics of moving people, moving equipment, both internationally in and out of the country, and then within South Sudan itself. Um, all of that, working within the UN framework. And it was really fascinating and a real privilege to both work with the UN civilians in the headquarters, who were extremely dedicated and extremely professional, and then also to meet the South Sudanese people and just to make it was a very small contribution, my personal one, but just to feel like we were doing something um, to help people live a better, more stable life.
Mm-hmm. Wait, I'm just not very good with geography. So South Sudan is in.
So South Sudan is in central eastern Africa. So it borders Kenya, it borders Ethiopia, and it borders Uganda.
Mm-hmm.
The role of the United Nations mission is to support the country. It had a very, very brutal civil war as part of its independence, and that civil war has continued, sadly. So there's a lot of UN peacekeeping. It's a big peacekeeping mission to try and prevent further violence, and then to help the country develop, whether that's economically, socially, politically.
Mm-hmm.
So the role of the British Royal Engineers was just to support the UN by building facilities for them. And then my role was really small. It was just helping that small task force. To move 150 people by plane takes a lot of paperwork, and so we were just helping complete the paperwork and maybe moving equipment. So if equipment had come in from the UK, my team's role would be to make sure we had what we expected, and then to arrange with the UN whether that would fly to these towns up north, whether it would be moved by road, moved by river.
Oh, that's amazing.
So yeah, I was lucky. I had a really strong group of specialist soldiers. Um, they did the hard work. I just sort of helped them out with the sort of leadership side of things and looked after it from that perspective.
That's amazing. So how does it feel to instruct people on climbing, and how's your experience with teaching that? Given that, do you know how, like, in general, teaching itself is like a really hard job, but then teaching climbing, I don't know. How was it for you to do that?
I've got to admit, I think I'd probably be a better climbing instructor, climbing teacher now than I was when I was young. Um, just because I've got a bit more patience now, and I'm a bit better at listening to people maybe than I used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I was fortunate in the military. We have these, these adventurous training courses that teach you how to teach, and so in some ways there's specific hard skills that somebody needs to learn to be a climber. So there's the physical movement over the rock, or the physical act of what you do with your ropes to make yourself safe, and those things are in some ways quite easy to teach because there are specific things you have to show people.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's other more soft skills, how to manage a group, how to manage yourself, and that's probably more difficult. Um, But I think I've probably matured a bit now, so I can understand how different people learn in different ways. And the biggest challenge, I think, is to being able to adapt your teaching style so that the people you're working with can learn in their own way.
Hmm.
And a lot of it maybe is just to make it safe, so that people can make their own mistakes and learn in their own way.
Wow, that sounds something interesting. So, how did you feel being part of the Antarctica Quest 2021?
My initial involvement was as a friend, really, as some of the team who were going were friends of mine, and I was just a supporter. And then they asked me to join when somebody else was sadly injured. So it is a huge privilege to be asked to join. But I have to admit, I was probably as scared as I was excited, because having been to Antarctica before, I sort of knew what I was getting. Well, I thought I knew what I was getting myself into. And it's not a place to be underestimated.
Definitely not.
So yeah, it was real privilege, but it was also, there was a certain amount of trepidation. And then in terms of Ernest Shackleton, years ago, probably 15, 20 years ago, I remember reading South by Shackleton. It's his account of an expedition that he led in it was 1917, 1918, where his plan had been to go to Antarctica and lead a team that were going to ski and travel all the way across the continent. But it's a famous expedition where the snow and ice conditions in the sea were so bad that their ship got stuck, and they couldn't move anymore. Then they all had to get off the ship because it got crushed in the ice and destroyed. So then they were living on the ice and they were running out of food. And then Shackleton led a small team who took one of the rowing boats off their ship, rigged it for one of the lifeboats, rigged it for sailing, and managed to sail it thousands or hundreds of miles across the Southern Ocean to a tiny little island called South Georgia, where they then climbed all over these huge mountains and glaciers to get down to a whaling station, and raise help. And this took months, years, and that story of endeavor and resilience, and if it wasn't true, it would be unbelievable.
True, I agree. Hmm.
To even think that we were going to do anything as bold or as resilient, as awesome as that would be really arrogant. And clearly, you don't want to do anything quite that dangerous because it's really, really hard and horrible. But I think one of an Ernest Shackleton, even after this expedition, he still continued. He still wanted to go back south. He was passionate about scientific research in the polar regions, about exploration. And so a big part of our expedition was celebrating that legacy. And so that's really quite nice and quite pleasant to be involved in such an endeavor, to continue in a really, really small way his legacy of scientific endeavor and exploration, I suppose.
I guess that would have been like a really, really, I don't know. It just sounds so hard. Even if it was for what Sir Ernest Henry has done or what you have done in Antarctica. So, but do you find traveling Antarctica hard? What do you feel about having a journey there? Because for like people like me, I don't think I'd ever be able to imagine myself in Antarctica. So, but how does it feel?
I think you do yourself a disservice, Raga. I think you could absolutely, um, you know, travel in Antarctica if you'd wanted to. These things are not impossible by any stretch. They are achievable by most people if you commit and you go for it.
Hmm.
In terms of traveling when we're there, I'm not going to lie. There were days when we had a very heavy sledge and you're dragging it up a very steep slope and your skis slip because it's icy, and it's quite hard work. It is hard work. Physically, that's hard work. And then there's also a slight element that at times we were in very dangerous places. There was a risk of crevasse fall, there was a risk of avalanches, and that has a certain mental hardship to it. It kind of plays on your mind somewhat.
Hmm.
But because I was with a really strong team, a really good group of people, a lot of those physical and mental challenges are reduced, because when you work as a team, if you're having a bad day because whatever reason, maybe you didn't sleep very well and you're feeling really tired, you know that the team will help you out and maybe they'll take a heavier load for you so you don't have to carry as much. Or maybe someone else will take the place on the front of the rope, um, where it's a little bit more challenging mentally, so that you don't have that mental burden. So working as a team really does make what is a hard endeavor easier. And we were really lucky on our expedition that team was there, and it was a really good team.
That sounds amazing. I mean, because I remember watching Antarctica only in like cartoon channels where there are like polar bears and everything. But to be honest, that sounds very resilient and teamwork based. So, if you would like to give one message to our listeners today, what would it be?
I think it's got to be that we all should try and seize every opportunity. I was super lucky that 15 years ago almost somebody said to me, how about coming on this expedition to Antarctica? And I thought, well, that sounds good. Yeah, maybe I'll apply and see if I get selected.
Mm-hmm.
And I was lucky enough to get selected, and then we worked hard to get away. And then more recently, again, when Paul, the expedition leader, sent me a WhatsApp message saying, do you want to come with us? It would have been really easy to think, oh no, it's too hard, I'm not fit enough, oh, it would be very difficult, I've got to do my work. And I just thought that wouldn't be, that's not the kind of lesson I want to give my children as they grow up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really, I'm super fortunate that my wife is really supportive. She was prepared to take the extra burden of looking after the children whilst I trained and whilst I went away. And, company that I work for, Costain, were unbelievably supportive in allowing me the extra time to go away on this expedition. So, yeah, seize every opportunity, because, no one can be certain when those opportunities might come round again if you haven't taken them when they get given to you.
That's an amazing thing. I definitely agree. Seeing you being so multi talented has inspired us all and also our listeners today. So, we'll finally close this by you. Seize every opportunity is something we will all keep in our mind. And thank you, Philip, for a great interview. And thanks everyone for listening to TechFest Talks as always. Tune in for more episodes and bye for now.